Hello, everybody, and welcome to another session of Astro-Babble. Very pleased that this continues to be going. Everybody continues to throw their charts my way via Messenger. If you would like to participate again and put yourself in the queue, please feel free to submit your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I need that exact birth time. And make sure to spell out the month and day for those of you overseas who use a day first, month first, day second format. So yeah, basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at 8 charts that everybody has lovingly donated. And those charts will be read directly by me. I've put them into my Astro software, and we will talk about the meanings and significations of the various planets, what specific things that I see in their charts that I think needs to be addressed from a physical and mental emotional perspective. Hey Lisa, hey Tony, hey everybody joining on. Thank you so much for chatting with me this morning. This is the fourth time that we're doing this. Yeah. So it's just turning into a fun little morning ritual that everybody's just enjoying while we're in quarantine. If you do have additional questions, you can always email me, sam@scorpiorisingastrology.com, or if you would like to book a personal consult instead of having your chart talked about publicly, you can always visit scorpiorisingastrology.com, my website, and submit a consultation request. As well as I have online classes on the planets, the signs, the houses, which you can access via scorpiorisingastrology.com as well. You were double booked. I love it, Alex. Thank you so much for allowing me to read for you. And Jaya, good morning. Julie, good morning. Okie dokie. So let's go ahead and jump right into the chart interpretations. We've got Tony up first. So Tony was born 5:50 p.m. in Dublin. And she's got Cancer on the ascendant. Woo! So Cancer ascendant plus the moon in Cancer on the ascendant. Isn't that just a ball full of love? Again, the ascendant is the major personality marker. A lot of people think that the sun sign is what we use for primary astrology, and indeed the sun is important. It is the center of our solar system, hence why it's called a solar system. But when we look from an astrology standpoint, the sign that's on the ascendant, or the sign that was rising, some of you might know it as the rising sign, when the ascendant is placed, it is the sign that was on the horizon at the time of your birth. It's said that the light from that sign's qualities is the first light that touched you. And that I think is a really beautiful image. But interestingly enough, Tony having a night chart, so 5:50 p.m., the moon was rising at that time and is about 5 degrees away from her ascendant. So she's got a double dose of Cancer moon, which I know because I have Cancer moon, can join the sun. I'm a new moon baby. And that's just a lovely placement. It makes her very mama bear-ish, is a good way to think about it. Somebody who's very loving, very nurturing, just wants to feed you, wrap you up in a blanket, and take care of you. That very mother type archetype energy, but also somebody who tends to protect their loved ones very fiercely. A lot of people forget that Cancer is not just a water sign, it's also a cardinal water sign. So it has that underlying fire, that underlying fight, that underlying very fierce protective quality that Cancer is often just thought of as this person who cries all the time, and indeed, we're very emotional people. However, when we find Cancer moon on the ascendant, that intuitive, that wateriness also comes with that fiery side as well when it comes to people that they know, like, and trust. Then we have Jupiter and Leo in the second house. Great for finances, especially because Jupiter and Leo in the second is ruled by the sun in Sag, a fire sign, in the sixth, which is just a couple degrees away from Venus in Sag in the sixth. Excellent. So what she does for work will bring boatloads of cash. That's naturally going to be a good financial placement that we see in the chart, because we have both benefics in the work, health, pet house, which is the sixth, but also the second house of finance. And that exchange is going to be very, very helpful, because the sun and Jupiter are in what we call mutual reception, meaning that the sixth house of health, work, and pets will be connected to the second house of financial wealth. And that's how we delineate somebody making good money from what they do for work. However, astrology separates what we do for a day job versus how we make our money versus our long-time career vocation. And when we look at the 10th house, which is Tony's career vocation, it's ruled by Mars in Virgo in the third, which is also very close to Uranus and Pluto in Virgo in the third. So we find that there is a writing or teaching and communication striving for Tony for her overall career. If she has not considered being a writer, a teacher, somebody who speaks her mind and says what she personally has experienced throughout her life, that would definitely be something that she would do very well at from a career perspective. She would be very well known for it. It might not be how she makes her money, which again is something that that astrology differentiates from. Sometimes how we make money is different from our day job. Sometimes our day job is connected with how we make money. Sometimes our career is how we make money. Sometimes we just accrue money from friends or from loved ones or from inheritances, or it's in the family trust. Depending on where the houses are connected in the natal chart, it just so happens that Tony's career house is connected to writing and teaching, but how she makes her money will be in her day job, specifically relating to health, pets, and work. Yeah, so that's that. Let's see, what else do we see in her chart? Fourth house Libra, ruled by Venus in the sixth as well. Working from home, definitely a possibility, or going into the family business, because that fourth house of family and home is connected to the sixth house of work and health. Saturn and Pisces in the ninth, that's a tricky placement, but it is ruled by Jupiter in the second. So it means that travel and foreigners and higher education will be connected to money as well. So traveling for the work is also a possibility, because that second house of wealth is connected to the sixth house of work, which is also ruled by Jupiter ruling Pisces in the ninth. That's that. Relationships are kind of where it gets a little bit sticky as well. Relationships with foreigners. So long-term partner might be out of the country or not born in the country where Tony resides, or she might move into another country and meet a lover, because that seventh house of relationships is ruled by Saturn in the ninth. And the ninth house is ruled by travel, foreigners, and higher education. She might also marry a tutor of foreign language, that kind of stuff. And that's where astrology gets really interesting, I think, is because there are so many interpretations that we could go through. But because that seventh house is connected to the ninth, we find that her relationships are going to be dominated by those, not just Saturnian themes, because Saturn is the ruler, but Saturnian themes when it comes to travel, foreigners, and higher education. So when I read one-on-one with clients, I always like to give like the craziest, most extreme version of what that placement could be. And it would be marrying somebody from a foreign country who also teaches foreign language at a college in that country, that kind of thing. Interesting. Yeah. Okie dokie. So that is Tony's chart. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. Just checking the chat real quick. Hey, Tundi. Hey, Jana. Good morning, Elisa. Brandy, hello. Thank you. Yes, what day is it anyway? That is a great question, Brandy. I totally agree, and I'm not quite sure. Okay, let's move on to our second chart. Our second chart is Tundi. So Tundi was born August 6th at 1 p.m. in Transylvania. That's lovely. So when we look at Tundi's chart, first thing that we see is Scorpio rising. Woohoo! So Scorpio is on the ascendant, conjoining Saturn on the ascendant, as well as Mars in Scorpio in the first. That's some fiercity. That's some intensity. That's some Saturnian themes, like both. When we look at Saturn and Mars together in the same house, Saturn and Mars are technically the two malefic planets, meaning that they tend to be the harshest. They tend to be the ones that do not forgive. They tend to be a little bit harder to deal with. And Tundi placing both of those in her first house of self means that she tends to have a personality that might rub people the wrong way at first. But Saturn and Mars, especially Saturn, because once she hits 30, once anybody hits 30, wherever the Saturn placement is, it really goes into this mature growth stage. So it's something that would be very, very difficult at first. Probably growing up, Tundi was a late bloomer, somebody who physically, as well, because the first house rules the body, had a lot of issues in development. But when she hit 30, that Saturn on the ascendant started to mature and ripen, and those gifts started to become unlocked, and all of the restrictiveness became focus, and all of the heaviness became groundedness, and all of the not necessarily pickiness, that's more of a Virgo thing. All of the kind of negativity became shrewdness, and that's how we would see Saturn evolving, is those negative traits that were very hard to process in childhood then came to fruition. Mars, on the other hand, is not as close to the ascendant, but it is in the first house, so there is this spicy side to the personality with Tundi, but because all of it is in Virgo, it's or not Virgo, Scorpio, it's kept under wraps. Scorpio is not a active sign. It prefers to be in the dark of its own cave. It prefers to be restful. It doesn't like the spotlight at all. However, there are also aspects in Tundi's chart that say the spotlight is actually in her chart. So when we look at her ascendant in Scorpio, and specifically Saturn in Scorpio at 10 degrees, making a square to her MC in Leo in the 10th, but also her MC in Leo, get this for you astrology nerds, her MC in Leo is conjoined the sun in Leo at 14 degrees. Absolutely hilarious. We've also got Venus in Leo in the 10th house as well. There is some star power in Tundi's chart that is absolutely hilarious, but it is directly conflicting with all of that Scorpio tendencies in the ascendant. Although the sun is in its proper place and Mars is in its proper place, there's always going to be this fight between the fixed signs in Tundi's chart. Do I step into the spotlight and share what I know and allow my light to shine bright? Or do I do what's comfortable? And do I step back and do I sulk into the recesses of my own experience and not let my light to shine? However, another interesting part about Tundi's chart is she's got Mercury in Virgo in the 11th. Mercury is in its exaltation in Virgo, loves to be in Virgo, great sign of mental acuity and sharpness, but it's in the house of friendships. So a lot of the friends that Tundi tends to surround herself with are high profile people when it comes to the mental game. Again, the idea that she's constantly playing Scrabble with friends or high intellect games to stimulate the mind. She has a very quick wit, and somebody who cannot keep up with that quick wit is not somebody for her when it comes to friends. In fact, she values mental acuity in her friends more than any other quality. She's got a lot of financial markers, but again, back to the teaching. Teaching seems to be a theme today. The moon in Sagittarius in the 2nd is being ruled by Jupiter in Capricorn in the 3rd. Now, Jupiter in Capricorn is technically in the sign of its detriment. It does not like to be in Capricorn, and it is in the 3rd house of communication. So back to that idea of rough communication, not necessarily being forthcoming, and slow to teach. But because Saturn in Virgo is on the ascendant and Saturn is ruling Jupiter in the 3rd, it's a natural teaching placement. It's not ideal and it's slow to blossom, but Tundi has natural teaching and writing skills that are a part of who she is. And those are actually being referred to her financial house as well. So if done correctly, and if she's able to shake a lot of the personality conflicts that seem to be pulling her out of the spotlight of her own making, she would actually do very financially well as a teacher. And somebody who writes and somebody who takes care of her neighbors. Her siblings also are connected to finance and lots of interesting stuff like that. She is also a workaholic when it comes to the Mars and Scorpio ruling the 6th house of work, because she's put that Mars placement in her house of personality, ruling her work, her health, her pets, loves animals, but also health concerns, especially when it comes to the colon, the digestive system, but also Mars stuff, the head, muscles, and blood, potential anemic tendencies there, because Scorpio tends to not process things in the lower gut well. Friend house and death house connected as well. So final note, one thing to be aware of, because we see Mercury and Virgo ruling the eighth house of death, which is Gemini, that friendship house and that death house are connected. So losing friends at an early age might compound some of that withdrawn emotional tendency. But if we are again able to break through and challenge the minds to grow out of those restrictive patterns, then we would be able to put the past behind us and not feel like Tundi should be hiding for any reason. So that's some good information, I think. Thanks, Tundi, for sharing your chart. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. I appreciate it. Yes. Lovely. Thank you. Accurate. Love you. Yeah, watch the replay. Thank you, Derek. Love you, Liz. Tundi. Oh, we need to redo Tundi's chart. And that's why timing is so important. Morning talk I can deal with. Love this. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I appreciate it. Let's go to our next chart, which is going to be Julie. Julie Bell. Okie dokie. Here we go. So Julie was born in Plymouth. Let's look at Julie's chart. Okay, we've got some issues right off the bat. Let's talk about why those issues are there. So we've got the ascendant in Sagittarius, but it's conjoined with Neptune. So we've talked about Neptune before as being a planet that we don't like to see very close to the ascendant. We would prefer Neptune be hidden. But there are unique qualities that I can already see kind of coming to the fruition of Julie's chart that I think are really interesting, nuanced but interesting. So when we look at Neptune being close to the ascendant, Neptune tends to make things sleepy. Neptune tends to make things confused. Neptune tends to make things slightly chemically intolerant. Because the ascendant and Neptune are in Sagittarius, blood sugar issues, because Sagittarius rules the liver, something that we need to be very aware of physically for Julie. But then also chemical sensitivity in general, but especially liver chemical sensitivities, things that would toxify the liver, being very careful of your supplements, any herbs that you're not sure of, but also, interesting things like being sensitive to caffeine. All of those things come to the surface with a Neptune conjoined ascendant. One of the major issues that I'm seeing is that the moon is in Scorpio in the 12th. So this is a sign that Julie is a very emotionally withdrawn person. It's not a characteristic that she likes to talk about, because the 12th house is the house of hidden enemies. It's also the house that tends to be the most hidden in the chart. So when we find planets in the 12th house, these are planets that don't get to be expressed, especially because on top of being in the 12th house, the moon is in Scorpio, which is a naturally hidden chart. So I would highly encourage Julie, if at all possible, to vent her emotions. And I think one of the ways that she vents her emotions is by the trine that her moon is making to her sun in the 4th in Pisces. So part of what she does really well is settling into a safe space like the home environment, because her sun is there. She's got Jupiter and Pisces there in the 4th house, which is an excellent placement. So retreating into the home, feeling safe in your own space, making sure that you're able to emotionally unpack after a hard day, and that your home doesn't become compromised for any reason, because that's really a very key part of who you are as a person, and it's how you actually open up all of those stuck, stagnant emotions that are hidden away in the 12th house. Because the 4th house is, no, let me take that back. Sun in Pisces, Jupiter in Pisces. Yep, that's good. It's just there's a lot happening in the 4th house of home. Interestingly enough, parents also being very wealthy, potentially having high status, because Jupiter denotes wealth, but also the sun is here, which is a very regal planet. It is connected to the 9th as well. The sun is ruling the 9th. So specifically parents or the home environment, family vacations were a big thing, or parents did travel for a living. Parents potentially were foreign as well. One parent in the family or both were of foreign nature, potentially adopted. Let's see, where else can we find bits and pieces of information? Again, connection between the 3rd house and the 6th house. So the idea that Julie would be an excellent teacher, writer, especially because she's got Mercury in Aquarius in the 3rd house, Venus in Aquarius ruling the 6th house in Taurus. That would be an excellent way for her to make money as a copywriter, or somebody who audits classes, or somebody who takes that Aquarian-ness in the third house and applies it to her sixth house of work. Saturn in Gemini in the seventh is connected to the second house of wealth. So where she's going to derive a large portion of her income is actually from spouses or partners, partners being intimately connected to her finances in a very, very big way. Mars is in Gemini in the seventh there. On the positive side, this brings a lot of intellectual stimulation from partners, somebody who tends to be both athletically fit and mentally fit. On the negative side, when I see Mars in Gemini, if it's not expressed appropriately, especially because Mars in Gemini is directly opposing the ascendant at 6 degrees, there is a tendency for verbal abuse, because Gemini is the sign of communication, Mars is the sign of war, and that is directly opposing the ascendant, which is the marker for the self. So we need to be very careful about that little snafu in the chart. However, because Mars is ruling the fifth house of creativity and sexuality, there is good sexual chemistry there between partners, and there is good creativity that partners tend to foster as well. Somebody who comes into your life and makes you access parts of yourself or acts in a muse type capacity would be one of the things that Julie's chart indicates. But that back to that Mercury in Aquarius, that Mercury in Aquarius in the third is ruling the 10th of career. So she could actually have a really great career as a writer if she wanted to. However, that's not how she's going to make her money. She's going to make her money via the spousal relationships, because that's the connection in her chart. Eighth house in Cancer being ruled by the moon in Scorpio in the 12th. Death themes in the chart, and also taxes and estates. So working with people who have passed away, actually leaving inheritances, or having an emotional need to connect with people who are on that brink of death, working in hospice. Wait, I'm getting something. So one of the interesting ways that Julie could express this placement of the moon in Scorpio ruling the 8th, but then also Gemini and Aquarius ruling the 10th, and Venus and Aquarius ruling the 6th, is pairing her knack for words with actual contracts and working with estates or last will and testaments to connect with people who are on the brink of death and emotionally fulfill her, but also work with all of those kind of sticky emotional spaces that she knows how to navigate very, very well. She does have a grand trine between that Saturn, Mercury, and Uranus in the 11th. So all of her relationship houses are actually lit up really well. Not necessarily with the most ideal placements, but she's a very charismatic person when it comes down to it. She just tends to be more of a homebody. Yeah. So that's Julie in a nutshell. Thanks, Julie. I appreciate you. Let's see. Great to see you, Donna. Thank you, everyone. Jessica can join square trine. Don't understand any of these terms. I'm about to work on a course on aspects. But again, if you would like a basic astrology book, you can always pick up Astrology for Yourself by Demetra George, or The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest. Basic, or just go to YouTube. Look at the Astrology Podcast by Chris Brennan, an excellent resource. With all of the basic astrology 101 stuff. Google the terms, use what you don't know as leverage in order to know, and make sure that you can do that. Unfortunately, I can't put pictures on the live feed because Facebook will not let me share my screen and go live at the same time. Get on that, Facebook. I need it. So that is that. But thank you for the comments, Jessica. I promise to get those classes out soon. Let's go with Lisa. Lisa's chart is up next, and we're about halfway through after Lisa. So Lisa was born at 5 p.m. in Nottingham. Love my knots people, my knottish. We have Leo ascendant being ruled by Sun at 0 degrees Aquarius. So we've got a cusp Aquarian here. Da, da, da. But again, there's that conflict between the first and the seventh, because the sun, although it's not making a direct opposition, it is sign-based opposition. So there is going to be relationship conflict in the chart, or identifying specifically too heavily with relationships. I think one of the things that we talked about in the first video is when we find planets who are ruling or connecting in the first and seventh houses, there's this theme of over-identification with relationships or relying too heavily on what relationships have to say. Your partner is not the end all be all of your existence, and we need to kind of break, especially in a chart like this, we need to break that idea that happily ever after with Prince or Princess Charming is the main goal of life, because it's actually not. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the moon. So the moon in Libra in her moon in Libra at 16 in the third, making a trine to Mercury in Aquarius in the seventh. So interesting. One of the traits that she values in a partner is a quick mind. But specifically, she might actually be attracted or serially attracted to writers and teachers. That might be a weak spot for her relationship wise. But one of the markers in her chart as well, Venus is ruling that third house of writing and communication. Seems to be a theme today. And Venus is in the fifth house of creativity. So when we look at Lisa's chart, creative writing is definitely in the cards. Not necessarily how she makes money, but what she will be known for, because Venus is also ruling her 10th house of career. Mercury is also ruling her second house of finance. So the idea of that seventh house and second house being connected as well. The people that she invites into partnership in her life will give financial gain. And that's a big thing. But she does have Pluto and Uranus, those generational planets, in the second house as well, meaning that money issues and understanding the power of money and the value of money is something that she's signed up to learn in this life. We've got Mars in the 8th in Pisces, not a sign it likes to be in, ruling everything in the 9th house of travel, foreigners, and higher education. The moon is directly opposing the MC in the 3rd. MC in the 9th opposing moon in the 3rd, rather. Saturn in Aries in the 9th, as well as North Node in the 9th, all ruled by Mars in the 8th. Higher learning about spirituality, actually going to school for topics like world religion, accounting, tax, things like that. The 8th house is the house of death, but it's also the house of taxes and estates, other people's money or business, which is different from the second house, which is opposite, which is your personal wealth. So the idea that one of the things that Lisa might major in college is tax, accounting, business, from just a fun astrology standpoint. But she's got that Saturn in the 9th, which really kind of irks me a little bit, because Saturn doesn't like to travel, but it's in the house of travel and foreigners. So it might be one of the things that she's reluctant to do, but traveling specifically for death, for business, for accounting, if she does pursue that work, especially because Mars is in Virgo in the 2nd, ruling her 8th house Mars, I think that she will travel for work. She will begrudgingly travel for work, and it will be connected to the accounting and financial fields, especially because Saturn is ruling her 6th house of work. There we go. So travel for work that involves a financial nature. That's all in Lisa's chart, which I find super fascinating. Let's look at, 10th house of career, ruled by Venus in Sag in the 5th. Interesting. Venus also making a trine to the North Node. Super creative. So much creative potential. And I think that one of the things that makes your chart difficult, Lisa, is also what makes it interesting. Because although you've got all the right planets in all the wrong places, is kind of a good way to think about it. Nobody's really in their zone, but because they're not in their zone, they're actually referring each other to interesting places in the chart, which makes you a very dynamic individual. you've got this hidden set of skills underneath it all that you can whip out on a moment's notice, and it seems totally unapplicable at the time, but you kind of MacGyver your way through it. That's a good way to describe Lisa's chart. It's a MacGyver chart, for sure. The one thing that we just need to be super aware of is that first house, seventh house pairing, because the sun does rule the ego and the self. Getting lost in relationships is not necessarily ideal for Lisa's chart, because she's got so much going on in terms of work and travel and creativity. Those things might be derailed by her relationships, actually. So yeah, that's a little bit about Lisa's chart. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, Lisa is an author. That's what she does. That's hilarious. Perfect. Thank you. Can you say those books again? So the two books are The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest and Astrology for Yourself by Demetra George. Yeah, so The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest and Astrology for Yourself by Demetra George. Those are the two. Thank you, everybody, for sending in all the messages. Again, do not post your birth time and date in the chat. Instead, send it to me privately. If you'd like to be put on the queue, definitely let me know. The queue is long. It's super long, but you can always schedule a private consult with me in the meantime, or check out classes via ScorpioRisingAstrology.com if you'd like that. Let's look at Elisa. Elisa was born 10:12 a.m. in Ranson. Okay. Let's look at Lisa's chart. So we've got a Virgo ascendant. Virgo ascendant being ruled by Mercury in the 11th, but it's combust the sun. Oh man, that's rough. Okay, so Elisa's chart brings up an interesting astrological concept for us, which is combustion. So the sun's placement isn't just isolated to a specific degree. In fact, there's a 15-degree window, so about 7.5 degrees on either side, that the sun is said to bring other planets out of view, because astrology is a science of light. When certain planets are conjoined the sun or within 7.5 degrees on either side of the sun, they are said to be combust and cannot be seen by the native, which means that a lot of Elisa's, specifically of Elisa's personal qualities, her Mars in Cancer and her Mercury in Cancer, are combust by the sun. Actually, Mars isn't combust, just the Mercury is combust, because Mercury is at 3 degrees, if I did my math right, and Mercury is just on the edge of that combustion. Okay, so we just need to be super aware that communication style might be a little bit, even though Mercury is ruling the chart, communication might be a little bit difficult because of that. People not necessarily understanding what you say. That's a big part of Elisa's chart. Sun in Cancer is just absolutely wonderful, though. It takes all of that hot, fiery solar energy and it just tampers it down and makes it super sensitive and gushy. I love that. Mars is also in Cancer, which again takes that fire energy and makes it soft and gushy. We might have a little bit of a fire-water balance crisis, but we do have Jupiter in Sagittarius. Oh, it's retrograde in the 4th. Oh goodness, we've got to get to that in a minute. The moon is in Aries, though. That's a good sign. So the moon in Aries swapping signs with Mars in Cancer in Elisa's chart means that they are in mutual reception. Bonus points, good remediation there. Good catch, Elisa. Good catch. Again, 7th house or 8th house moon being ruled by 11th house Mars, and 11th house Mars being ruled by 8th house moon. The death of friends early on. Definitely shaping to Elisa's personality. That's not necessarily a great thing to see in somebody's chart, but she's got some aspects to counter it. Let's see, where are those aspects? We've got Jupiter in the 1st house in Sagittarius, which is retrograde, but also slightly conjoining the Mars in the Uranus in the 5th in Sag. All of that access in the 4th house plus South Node and Neptune, there was a very chaotic family dynamic growing up. All of those planets bring confusion, they bring upset feelings, they bring South Node as an energy suck. Jupiter in Sagittarius is great, but it's retrograde, it's backwards. So it's almost like everything that should have happened happened in the reverse. A lot of tough family lessons for Elisa growing up. That's pretty rough. Childhood was not necessarily kind, um, especially with that moon at 24 making a trine, making an applying exact trine at 24 degrees to the south node. Just the idea that loss was part of the childhood. And also coming in with that flavor of understanding the purpose of death, understanding, especially from an early age, that things are impermanent and that everything changes. There is no consistency. In fact, the only thing that we can count on is change. Really, that's a major lesson in that chart dynamic. Venus in Leo in the second, ruling the ninth. Interesting, going to school for nursing, going to school also. Here's where it gets super crazy, everybody. Again, the idea of me trying to give the most accurate, but also like most extreme interpretation that I could possibly whip out. Because the ninth house rules higher education, travel, foreigners. Venus and Leo in the 12th, which is the house of hidden enemies and hospitalizations. But Venus in Leo speaks to me as being a makeup artist and studying makeup art, or actually being a cosmetologist for the dead, being a mortician's assistant who actually dolls up people who have deceased, or even traveling to hospitals and doing the makeup of those who are terminally ill. Like if she were to go to a cancer hospital and work with children and specifically like do makeup for the kids, that would be a really interesting thing that she could do. Because she's just got those skills. That Venus in Leo in the 12th is hidden, but Venus in Leo loves to be flamboyant. So I think that might override some of those hidden tendencies, especially because it's conjoined the MC in the ninth, which is again travel, foreigners, and higher education. Venus in Leo is also ruling the second house of finance. So we've got, again, that hospitalizations, hidden enemies house ruling her house of finance. So going to school for medicine, going to school for, again, those 12th house topics of hospitals or karmic healing, that would probably be in the cards as well. Where's Saturn? Saturn's in the second house of finance as well, ruling the sixth house of work and health. So I definitely think that nursing or working in hospitals is part of what astrology thinks Elisa would do best. However, she might do it in a very creative and spontaneous way because that moon is also making a trine to Venus in the 12th. Working with the dead and specifically kind of, again, zhuzhing up the dead and getting some good color back into their cheeks, even if it's artificial, is part of that Cancer Sun quality, I think, that motherly quality, and that Mars in Cancer quality, that action to care that Elisa brings forward very well in her chart. Love it. Thank you so much. Hey, David. Elisa, all the time. Good. Water, fire, balance, crisis, just taking notes. Elisa actually used to do makeup, lol. That's funny. Hilarious. So that's how astrology works, y'all. Not making it up. Okay. So let's go to our next chart. Thank you to everybody who continues to message me. I've got my charts for today. I can add you to the list. Mary, who was born at 9:50 a.m. in Paddington. Let's look at Mary's chart, shall we? Ooh, Jupiter conjunct the ascendant. How fun. So she's got the ascendant in Gemini at 27, conjoined Jupiter in Gemini at 24, loose conjunction by 3 degrees, but it's still close enough. Jupiter has a wide bound. It's very big. So Jupiter conjoined the ascendant. Luck is really the big thing that we can look at for Mary's chart. Oh my God, are you kidding me? On Mary's chart, she's also got Venus at 27 in Aquarius, making an exact trine. That was really fast. I'm so sorry. I need to slow down. There's just so much to say. I'm trying to get it all out. I only got like 5 minutes for each chart. I'm trying to say it all, fit it all in the time. So she's got Venus in Aquarius in the ninth, making a trine to her ascendant and a loose trine to Jupiter. She's got both benefics in very close proximity, degree and aspect wise to her first house of personality and to her ascendant. Lucky, lucky, lucky. Very, very lucky. Beautiful personality. Because Venus has graced the ascendant, there is an element of beauty. There is an element of grace, of physical beauty, but also internal beauty. Especially because it's in air signs, we can look to the mind as also being intellectual. But there are other things that we need to talk about here as well, like this Mercury-Saturn conjunction. Ooh, Mercury and Pisces in the sign of its detriment in the 10th, and Saturn, that's going to be a little bit problematic. But Jupiter's ruling it. It's just tough. Ooh, we'll come back to that. I need to think on that for 2 seconds. But personality-wise, checking a lot of boxes. Mars at 19 in Aries, ruling the Sun at 14 in Aries in the 11th. Girl, your friends are a hoot. Mars in Aries and Sun in Aries. Mars is in its proper sign, and the Sun is in Aries in the sign of its exaltation, and then in the 11th, no problem with friends whatsoever, except when they get too rowdy and aggressive. Wouldn't surprise me if she has a lot of friends in the military. Wouldn't surprise me if she has a lot of friends that are, again, like hypermasculine, very aggressive, competitive sports, that kind of thing. All of those martial qualities. Because Mars is ruling her 6th house of work, she also tends to make a lot of friends in her work environment for her day job. However, Neptune in Scorpio is also in the 6th, so working with addictions, working with sexual trauma, also potentially part of the cards. Let's go back to that Saturn. Let's go back to that Saturn and Mercury in Pisces in the 10th. That's a tricky placement because it's the house of career. Yeah. Mercury is in detriment. Saturn makes things hard right off the bat. They are conjoining, and they're making a loose square to Jupiter. So I think one of the things that might be a little bit of an issue for Mary is the idea of success potentially being toxic or poisonous. When I've seen this in other charts, it's been a little bit tricky to pin down because there's this idea that success is evil, that success is that somebody is not worthy of success, or that the people at the top are compromising the people at the bottom. Just that idea that, it's a scarcity consciousness would be a good way to think about it. But because there is mutual reception, that might be mitigated. It's just there is conflict between the self and the career, and understanding that it's going to need a lot of unpacking for us to delve into that house of self, that 10th house of the highest point of the chart, really. The place where we would find our personal goals. Having so much affliction there, that's going to be a little bit of a tough topic, is balancing the self with fame. We've got the moon in Virgo in the 4th, also slightly opposing all of that in Pisces. Yeah, just the idea, she would rather be at home, but home is also slightly toxic. We've got Pluto and Uranus in the 4th in Virgo. So there's the idea that if she stays too long at home, despite how much she likes it and how much she could clean everything 20 different times in a day, because Virgo tends to do that, the home is a toxic environment for Mary. So we would want to get her out, activate her friendship house, really work with some of those enlivening characteristics that might bring out her personality in a more positive way, as opposed to trying to stay at home, trying to work from home, trying to figure out this whole business thing. That's not going to positively aspect her personality. We really need to get her to open up a book, to learn something, to travel, to go out with friends, and to really make the most out of life instead of wallowing in the recesses of what could be, what has been, and what is even. Creating a fantasy life, in this case for Mary, would actually be more beneficial, and constantly looking on the bright side. Okay, so that's what we see with Mary. Thank you, everybody, for for jumping on. Yep, just submit your no speed up. I know. Thank you, Derek, for reminding me. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, just submit your chart information to me. If you'd like your chart done privately, we can also do that. I'm doing well. Thank you so much, Julianne, for asking. Okay, let's go on to, we've got 15 minutes and we've got 2 more charts to go, so I'll spend about 7.5 minutes on each. So let's look at Stacy. Stacy was born 2:05 a.m. in Joliet, something like that. Oh, goodness. First house, 7th house themes. Here we go. So we've got the ascendant at 23 degrees of Sag. We've got the moon at 22 degrees of Gemini. They are in opposition, which means that the ascendant, the place of self, is in direct opposition to the moon in her relationship house. So we've got the emotions of her partner, but also her own emotions directly conflicting her personality, which is very fiery, very Sagittarian. She's got Jupiter in Aries in the 5th, ruling her ascendant in Sag. All of this creative energy. Can't get over how much creative energy this person has, which is really, really helpful. However, the relationship dynamic might oppose that slightly. We've got a fascination with 0 degree stuff. Jupiter is at 0 degrees. Venus is at 0 degrees. A lot of fortune is at 0 degrees. Random. Let's see what else. Neptune and Sagittarius in the 1st house of self. Again, we've kind of gone over this. Although the Jupiter Aries, I think, mitigates that a little bit. Just the idea that you tend to get a little bit too drunk, a little bit too fast. Both metaphorically and physically, because Neptune, again, with Neptune in Sagittarius in the 1st house of the body, we find that that's going to be an overly toxified liver, or a liver that can't necessarily process chemicals the way that other people can. But then also metaphysically, Neptune being in the 1st house means that there tends to be this air of ambiguity, this already kind of metaphysical wishy-washiness about the personality, which also makes you super fun, but also loosens boundaries in a way that can be slightly compromising. And we find some of those loosened boundaries in the home environment with family. So we've got Jupiter in the 5th of creativity, which is ruling the 4th house of family. Unfortunately, we've got Mercury in Pisces here, which again is in the sign of its detriment, ruling the 10th house. We've got the sun in Pisces on the cusp at 29, just 1 degree. If she was born 1 day later, she would have conjoined the sun in Jupiter in Aries to make this powerhouse of creativity. But she chose to hold herself back. She chose to be born a day earlier, to understand what it means to be on the verge of a creative breakthrough, but not necessarily to follow through with it. And I think that kind of self-deprivation is something that we need to look at in the chart, because the only way that we really bring something into the world is by making sure that it does get on paper. And unfortunately, there are too many distractions in the chart for that creativity, that massive amount of creative wealth that she has in her chart, to really come through. So I think if we were to imbue any quality into Stacy's chart, we would really need to work on a sense of focus. Because the sun in Pisces is here in the 4th and Mercury in Pisces is here on the 4th, we would want to stay out of the home in terms of creativity, because it does tend to be a little bit too wishy-washy, or make sure that there is a home studio that can be isolated, that can be either like in a mother-in-law suite, or can be separate from the home while still being in that safe space of the home. I think that would be a really interesting way to not get distracted, but to also feel safe. Also, the home has to be very spiritual because Pisces is there. Let's look at the Venus at 0 degrees of Taurus, because I think that's super interesting. It's also ruling the 11th house of friendships. So we've got that Venus and Taurus in the 6th. So work, pets, as well as health has got a good bonus. We would need to watch metabolism, thyroid, neck stuff, ligament stuff in her chart as well. Ruling the 11th house of friendships, but Pluto's in the 11th house of friendships. Work friends might actually become toxic. Just because you work with somebody does not mean you need to be their friend, Stacy. Because Pluto is there, especially, we would need to be aware of sabotage in that department. Friends who, again, will mature at 50. So if you're making friends with people who are over that hump, it's going to be better because they'll be able to harness those Pluto qualities and you'll be able to recognize them. But in the meantime, we just need to be super aware that at first blush, just because somebody's in your immediate vicinity does not mean you need to be their friend. But that goes back to themes of being focused, making sure that quality happens over quantity, which I know is the worst thing to tell somebody with a Sagittarius and Pisces dynamic in their chart. You've got your ascendant in Sagittarius, you've got your moon in Gemini, you've got your sun in Pisces. You're literally, your top three are in mutable signs. You're super mutable, you're all over the place, and we really need to kind of narrow you down. I think the most narrow and focused part of your chart is that Mars and Sagittarius in the third of teaching and writing, which is ruled by your Saturn in the 8th house of death, as well as taxes and estates. So I think if we were to look at maybe a way that you could focus, it would be being creative in a way that is actually grounded. So not necessarily making art, but making practical art, making art that allows people to not necessarily feel something, but think about a concept and maybe usher them to plan for things in the future. So if you were to work on creative endeavors that had not just a message, but an actionable step, use your creative medium to get people to focus on what they need to focus on, as opposed to just, oh, that's pretty, or oh, that's neat, or oh, that kind of moved me. But moved towards what, Stacy, is what I would then ask. Have a game plan for your creativity, be a little bit more focused, and remember that not everybody's your friend. That's kind of a big lesson in Stacy's chart. Thank you, everybody, for sending in your times. I appreciate it. I will respond to messages after we're done. Thank you, Alex, for the recommendation. I really appreciate it. We've got one more chart to focus on, and we've got 8 minutes and 30 seconds to do it. So let's do it, shall we? Liz was born at 6:30 a.m. in Tampa. So let's look at Liz's chart. So we've got the ascendant at 22 degrees Sagittarius, being ruled by Jupiter in the 10th. Naturally going to be very charismatic, naturally going to have that career tendency, just being well known. Jupiter is that planet of abundance. Having it in the 10th house is great. Having it rule the ascendant, the personality, having a big personality in general is something that comes naturally to Liz. We do have Pluto and Uranus, the two generational planets, up in the 10th house. So again, that idea of making sure that you understand the reason why fame exists, that you don't poo-poo power, that you understand that in order to step up to a platform and to hold a certain amount of power can be a valuable thing. And especially one of those big platforms is money. Because you've got Mercury in the 2nd house in a cazimi with the sun, heightening that Mercury quality, upping your finance. Money is not an issue, but it is ruling your 10th house of career success. I think success is something that you just need to become more comfortable with. Success is something that comes naturally, but it is also something that is feared in your chart. So if we understand that there is a reason why power exists, and it can exist in a benefic state, it doesn't have to be, oh, well, the more power that we have, the worse off that we are, because the greatest corruptor is power. Yes, but we can also utilize that power to do some great things. We've got some interesting pileups happening in the 12th house. So she's got Moon in Scorpio, Venus in Scorpio, Neptune in Scorpio, all in the 12th. Again, a very hidden 12th house. Emotions are hidden by nature. Venus in Scorpio is also in its detriment, or in its fall, rather. It is opposing the natural sign that it rules, Taurus, so that's not a great thing. Neptune in Scorpio being in the 12th, also not necessarily, it's where we want it. We want the hidden things to stay hidden. And but one of the things that Liz and I have actually talked about before is the idea of these three planets stacking up in the 12th being working with addiction, because Venus in the 12th is ruling her sixth house of work. The idea of working with people who have chemical addiction, who have alcohol addiction, who are in recovery. That's going to be a big part of what fuels her moon, which is in Scorpio, and allows her to vent a lot of that feeling space. Also, pets and health, working in the health field, working with pets. All of that very, very important to Liz, because again, all of those subjects of the 12th are connected to the 6th due to rulership. Let's see, we've also got fifth house Saturn and Aries ruled by third house Mars and Aquarius. That is a mutual reception. Bonus points to Liz. So we've got Saturn in Mars's sign and Mars in Saturn's sign. They are trading signs, which means that the fifth house of creativity, parents, sexuality is connected to the third house of writing, teaching, communication, and neighbors. So we've got this exchange between our two malefic planets, but they're hyper focused and they're trading signs, which boosts them up. I think that if we were to work on creative writing as a theme, I think if we were to work on helping people unlock their own creativity, maybe even doing some parenting workshops, because the fifth house does rule children and parents. That might actually be a really interesting way to unlock some of that Mars type energy, that drive, that will, that action. Mars in the third is also ruling all those planets in the 12th in Scorpio. So I think writing and teaching again about the hidden enemy of all of these Scorpio topics. So the idea of sexual abuse, the idea of trauma, the idea of, again, just abuse in general, or things that are kept hidden that are innately painful and mysterious. That's going to be what Liz specializes in, communicating and teaching, because that Mars is so well placed in Aquarius in that third. It's going to be a really great way for her to just kind of kick ass and take names. Would be a good way to think about it. Fifth house, fifth house Saturn is actually ruling her second house of finance. So her creative endeavors have a large chance of success financially, working with, again, the writing, but also any sort of creative endeavor. If she works with her creativity, there is a 100% chance that it will turn into income, especially if that creativity involves some sort of written medium. So as an example, if she creates something physical, yeah, don't just let it be physical. Tie it up with some sort of postcard or written message or prayer or psalm or some sort of written medium that will really help to take the symbolism of the object to the next level. Don't just include the physical medium, include the written medium as well, because that's where a lot of your chart speaks towards even greater success potential, is not just doing the creativity for Mars, but writing about the creativity and using your words, your communication, your teaching, your ability to speak, to open up that part of your chart. Some issues with death, however, are definitely part of the equation as well, because the moon in Scorpio is ruling the 8th house of death and estates. Definitely a life lesson for Liz when we look at the idea of the pain of loss, the complication of estate matters, especially estate matters that are naturally hidden, and understanding what a Pandora's box that can possibly be. We've got that moon in the 12th that is hidden, ruling the 8th house of death. So we've got that mystery of what happens when somebody does pass away, and how does all of that come to the surface in a very mysterious, although loving, but potentially toxic and not necessarily straightforward manner and fashion. Yeah, so that's a good summary of Liz's chart. Oh, and she's super fascinated with and prefers her friends to be deeply entrenched in all of those fun Scorpio underbelly topics that she's involved in. So, surrounding herself with people who are very spiritual, but also occulty in nature, loving people who are also in that slightly or have exposure to large amounts of trauma. Those are the people that she naturally attracts as friends because Venus in the 12th of hidden enemies and hospitalizations in Scorpio is ruling her 11th house of friendships. Cool. And that puts us at exactly 11:29. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, everybody, for jumping on. Hey, Debbie. Yes, so this is the fourth round of our live Astro-Babble sections. Thank you all for joining. I appreciate it. This will be posted on the Scorpio Rising Astrology YouTube channel. So if you would like to watch previous videos, you totally can. And those are available via the YouTube channel. If you would like to book a private consult, you can always shoot me an email, sam@scorpiorisingastrology.com, or visit scorpiorisingastrology.com. Give me your birth information. We can set a date, do it privately as opposed to on the internet. Yeah, and then I also have classes. I have classes about the planets. I have classes about the signs. I have classes about the houses. I have classes about herbalism and herbal energetics, which is one of my newer courses. So if you would like to get in on that, hey Vicky, if you would like to get in on any of those, definitely feel free to visit the website and we can talk about it. But again, I've got a huge queue. If you would like to submit your name for the queue, feel free to send your birth date, place, time, exact birth time, spell out the day and the month as well, and I will add you to the queue. But in the meantime, have a fantastic rest of the day. And for those of you who subscribe to my daily transit or my weekly transit forecast, you'll know this last line. I should probably start saying it after the live streams because I say it on my forecast. A little bit of Hunger Games flavor. May the stars be ever in your favor.